Hey guys, tonight we're settling up and heading way back to the dusty trails of the American frontier. We're not talking about the Hollywood version of cowboy life, with dramatic duels and perfectly clean heads. No, tonight, you are the cowboy, and let me warn you up front, it's going to be a long, dusty, slightly smelly kind of day. You might not even survive until dinner, but hey, at least you'll have a great view of the stars when you collapse face first into your bedroll. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments what city are you in, and what time is it for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun hasn't even peeked over the horizon yet, but you're already awake, not by choice. Mind you, something between a grumble and a full-on bovine opera has erupted right outside your tent. Flapper, what passes for a tent when you're on the trail? It's just canvas, dirt, and a lot of hope. Your back aches from sleeping on uneven ground. Your face feels tight from yesterday's dust, and your nose, well, it's greeted by a smell that could only be described as boiled beans meets horse sweat. Good morning, partner. Someone across the camp is already stoking the fire. This Cookie, he's not actually named Cookie, just cooks, so he is Cookie. You nod at him, and he grunts something unintelligible while poking a pot full of beans with a spoon that's seen more campfires than you've seen birthdays. You stretch your arms and legs, stepping into stiff boots and reaching for your hat. No cowboy would be caught dead without their hat, not because of fashion but because the sun out here doesn't play fair. That white brim is your best defense against the kind of sunburn that could cook an egg on your scalp. As you shuffle toward the fire, someone hands you a dented tin cup filled with something that claims to be coffee. It's more like hot bitterness with floating ash. You sip it anyway. The first task of the day is just being awake, really awake, because soon you'll be responsible for about 300 head of cattle and a whole lot of moving, dust-kicking responsibility. But first, beans. Again, you squat near the fire and accept a tin plate with beans, a dry biscuit, and something that may have once been bacon. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because your jaw hasn't fully woken up yet. Did you know the average cowboy consumed over 5,000 calories a day? No, not because of a trendy high-protein diet, but because wrangling cattle is exhausting. You're going to need every bite. Someone behind you lets out a yawn that sounds more like a battle cry. You look around, faces still blurry with sleep, boots half-laced, hats barely on heads that everyone's moving, slowly, grudgingly, but moving. And here's the thing, mornings out here are chilly. You'd think the desert is always hot, but night steals the warmth, and dawn returns at one reluctant degree at a time. Your fingers are stiff, your breath is fighting, but the sun is coming, and once it does, everything's going to get hot fast. Now would be a good time to sneak off for a moment of privacy if you can find it. No bathrooms out here, just space and, hopefully, not too many curious cows. By the way, historians still debate whether cowboys used any system at all for waste disposal, or if it was just dig a hole and forget about it. Probably the latter. By the time you get back to camp, the energy has shifted. The quiet rustling of tents and mumbled greetings has given way to the clink of metal, the creak of leather, and the occasional moo of protest. The herd knows what's coming. You do, too. You toss your tin plate into a wooden cradle. No dishwashing today. Just scrape and stack and roll your shoulders. Breakfast is over. The real day is about to begin. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll stay on your horse the entire time. You make your way over to your horse, who looks about as thrilled to see you as you are to see him. He's still chewing lazily on a tuft of grass like he knows exactly what kind of day it's going to be. You give him a pat on the neck anyway, partly to say good morning, partly to remind yourself that this 1,000-pound animal is now your co-worker, your transportation, and if things go south, your emergency getaway plan. Saddling up isn't glamorous, it's a workout. You hoist the heavy leather saddle over his back, making sure it's centered. Then the cinch white strap that wraps under the horse's belly to keep the saddle in place. You tuck it tight, step back, adjust the stirrups, and double-check the blanket underneath, because if anything's off, you'll know it real fast, usually by falling off or developing a rash in a place you don't want to talk about. You swing your leg over and settle into the saddle. The leather creaks under your weight. It's not a comfortable seat. No memory foam or just something that keeps you from bouncing off when your horse decides to remind you he has opinions. Around you, the other cowboys are doing the same. There's a rhythm to it now. Saddles thump, spurs jingle, horses shift in place, already sensing the day's work ahead. The smell of dust and sweat hangs thick in the morning air. You ride over to the chuck wagon for a final check-in. Cookie waves a spatula at you like a blessing. You nod. That's as close as it gets to a goodbye out here. Then the foreman, usually the oldest, grumpiest guy with a voice like gravel, gives the signal. You and the rest of the crew fan out, starting the slow, deliberate process of getting the cattle moving. It's a bit like herding toddlers, who each weigh 1,000 pounds and don't care about your personal goals. You're at the flank today position on the side of the herd. Your job is to keep the cattle from wandering off, which they love to do for reasons that remain a mystery to both science and cowboys alike. Historians say some cows were actually known for specific personalities. One was called Old Pancake because she refused to move more than 10 feet without flopping down. Your horse sidesteps as one of the cows gives a low bellow, possibly aimed directly at your self-esteem. You nudge him for it and click your tongue, trying to steer her back in line. It's not glamorous. It's barely efficient, but it works eventually. You fall into the rhythm, the plodding pace of the herd, the steady creak of saddle leather, the occasional shout from a rider corralling a straggler. The sun is climbing now, casting long, golden shadows across this scrubby landscape. And this is what most of your day will be, moving slowly, watching, adjusting, trying not to drift off. Cowboys covered miles and miles of terrain, often moving the herd 10 to 15 miles a day, but at cow speed that feels like forever. You pass another rider, probably Miguel, with tips his head and grins, revealing a missing front tooth. "How's she moving?" he calls. "Like molasses uphill." You shout back. He laughs and rides off, his horse kicking up a puff of dust. You squint and tug your head lower over your eyes. The sun's really starting to flex now. Funny thing, most people think cowboying is about gunfights and saloon brawls. In reality, it's more like a really long, dusty commute. With cows, the historian Richard Slatter once wrote that the average cowboy spent far more time fixing saddles than shooting anything. And honestly, that checks out. You shift your weight in the saddle, trying to find a less painful position. There isn't one. Eventually, you spot a few cattle veering off toward a dry creek bed. Great. You steer your horse toward them, gently pushing them back into formation with a few clicks and calls. No need to yell. They don't respond to peg. They respond to calm consistency, like toddlers, or cats, or maybe both. Somewhere behind you, a cow lets out a long, dramatic moo like she's auditioning for a Western opera. You sigh. It's going to be a long ride. By now, the sun is overhead. The heat is starting to settle on your shoulders like a heavy coat, and your canteen is sloshing with the last few inches of water. The next stop isn't for a while, so you grit your teeth, shift in the saddle again, and ride on, because out here, there's only one rule: keep moving or get left behind. You're about 2 hours in, and the romantic idea of being a cowboy has officially evaporated in the heat. Your shirt clings to your back. There's dust between your teeth, and despite your best efforts, your horse has developed a sudden fascination with veering slightly off course, like he's got a personal grudge against straight lines. But the real test, the cows. They do not want to cooperate today. In fact, you're starting to think they had a group meeting last night and decided unanimously to mess with you. One of them, a large, speckled steer with a dent in his ear, has decided that today is his day to rebel. You watch him begin his slow, deliberate detour away from the herd, like he's just remembered an urgent appointment in the opposite direction. You nudge your horse and head him off, gently guiding him back toward the others. But he resists. He does this little sidestep move, shaking his horns like he's in a standoff. It's not an attack, it's just being difficult. You try again. This time, he bolts. You're off in a flash, galloping after him through the dry brush, dodging sage and yucca. Your head nearly flies off. Your canteen does fly off. You lean forward, gripping the reins tight, eyes squinting against the sun. Your horse thunders beneath you, and for a second, just a second, you do feel like you're in a movie. Then the steer stops. Abruptly, you almost ride past him, pulling back hard on the reins. Dust clouds swirl around you both. He stares at you, you stare back. Seriously, you mutter, panting. He gives a low, bored moo. Eventually, after some not-so-gentle persuasion and an awkward game of reverse cow psychology, you get him turned around and hang back toward the group. Your horse is puffing, you're sweating through your shirt, and the steer, he looks smug. You rejoin the herd and fall back into position, pretending like nothing happened, but one of the other cowboys saw it. He tips his head and grins. Nice wrangling, Bronco champ. You shake your head and sip the last warm drop from your canteen. Now, it's easy to think that this kind of thing only happened to the greenhorns, but the truth is, even seasoned cowboys dealt with that one cow almost daily. Some historians even joke that cow psychology should have been part of training. There's no definitive data, but frontier diaries and journals are littered with colorful nicknames for particularly uncooperative bovines like Old Loco, Captain Cowback, and one especially defiant heifer referred to only as Satan. And here's the wild thing. Cows aren't dumb. They remember. Some would pick a favorite spot to wander off to, again and again, like it was their personal getaway spot. Others had feuds with certain horses, or even cowboys. One historical account talks about a steer who waited until a cowboy dismounted before charging his bedroll into a creek. You spend the rest of the morning half riding, half arguing with cows. The herd moves in slow, waves forward, hesitate forward again, and just when you think things are finally settling down, someone up ahead shouts, "Stampede!" But it's a false alarm. Turns out a rabbit darted through the bushes and startled one of the younger steers. The tension passes, but your heart is still pounding. Stampedes are real, by the way, and terrifying. A spooked herd can flatten a man, a wagon, or even another herd. The worst part, they can happen because of a sneeze. Literally, one diary described a cow sneezing, causing 10 others to panic, and by the end of it, 6 miles of chaos. You shake off the image. Today's not that day, hopefully, for now. The only thing stampeding are your thoughts. You glance at the sun, already climbing higher than you'd like. Lunch is still a while away, and you're already dreaming of beans and biscuit crumbs. But no rest yet. Another cow's eyeing the creek bed, and guess who has to go bring her back? Yeah, you. At long last, the herd begins to slow, not because they're tired of walking out there, but because it's finally time for what passes as a breakout here. Midday rest and grub. To call it lunch might be a bit generous, but it's the closest thing you're going to get to a picnic. You guide the cows to a shaded patch of low trees near a shallow stream. They take the invitation immediately, flopping down in dust clouds and flicking their tails with relief. You, on the other hand, take a moment to dismount. That first step off your horse is a down, so your legs are numb. Your back cracks like a knuckle, and your knees remind you you're not as young as you hoped. Still, your boots hit the ground, and for a second, everything feels quiet. The chuck wagon's already there, parked a little ways off. Cookie is in full swing, slapping ladlefuls of beans into tin bowls with the kind of efficiency that only comes from feeding cranky cowboys for 20 years straight. You shuffle over, collect your meal beans, a piece of hardtack, and what may or may not be coffee, and plop down on the ground with a groan. The beans are hot, salty, and deeply forgettable, but you eat them like they're gourmet, because out here, anything warm that doesn't taste like saddle leather is a win. Now, despite the dust and fatigue, This is the time of day when you finally start to connect with the others. Cowboys might seem quiet and stoic from a distance, but once the saddles come off and the plates come out, everyone loosens up a bit. You lean against a tree, chewing slowly while the guy next to you is named Tom. But everyone calls him to Thumb tells a story about the time he accidentally branded his own boot. Didn't feel it for a second, he says, shaking his head. Then it was like my foot caught fire and forgot how to scream. You snort laughing to your beans. Someone else pipes up with a tale about waking up with a snake curled in his saddlebag. Another cowboy, half asleep with his head pulled down, mutters, "That's why I sleep on my saddle, boys." And this is cowboy culture. Not just cattle and grit, but stories, shared nonsense, survival tips disguised as jokes. Some historians even argue that the oral tradition of trail tales is a form of American folklore passed down from cowboy to cowboy like frontier bedtime stories, with a lot more dust and fewer happy endings. In fact, one surprising study from the University of Oklahoma found that cowboy humor was essential to mental health during long drives. Joking about blisters, cows, and cookies mystery meat help keep morale from completely evaporating under the desert sun. You finish your beans and sip what remains of your coffee, which now tastes like burnt wood chips with a hint of metal. You think that's the cop's fault, not the brew. Eventually, you lie back, hands behind your head, eyes half-lidded under your head. The breeze shifts just enough to rustle the trees. Somewhere nearby, a cow lets out a satisfied grunt and flops into the dirt like she owns the place. You close your eyes. You could sleep now, right here, just a little, but the break never lasts long. The foreman calls out a 5-minute warning. You groan along with the others, pulling yourself upright and brushing dirt off your shirt. It's time to saddle up again. Before you mount, you check your gear, retie your canteen, tighten your saddle, stretch your aching legs. Every cowboy has his own little ritual before the afternoon ride. Some mumble to their horse, some spit for luck. One guy nobody questions this touches a dried out lizard he keeps in his coat pocket. Yes, really, and no, we don't ask. You give your horse a reassuring pat. He flicks his ears like he's unimpressed but tolerant. You swing back into the saddle with slightly more grace than earlier and fall back into formation as the herd begins to move again. Afternoon is the longest part of the day. The sun is unforgiving now. The cows are sluggish, and everyone's patience is thinner than your last pair of socks. But you ride on, because that's what cowboys do. The afternoon sun is officially declared we're underwood to live. It's hanging directly above you now, turning your hat into a portable oven and your shirt into a sticky second skin. Even your horse seems annoyed as ears flick back every few minutes, like he's reconsidering this entire arrangement. The cows, forget it. They've slowed to a crawl, some of them outright refusing to move, unless someone yells or waves a hat dramatically in their direction. And guess who gets to do the yelling and the waving? Yeah, you. But as tedious as it is, this stretch of the drive is where you start to notice things, little rhythms, details, like the way the herd shifts together, moving like a single dusty blob of grumbling muscle, or the weird creaky chirping sound grasshoppers make when they fling themselves out of your path like startled popcorn. And you're not imagining it. The cows have personalities. Some seem genuinely confused about where they're going. Others stick to their friends, practically shoulder to shoulder. There's one calf that keeps tripping over his own legs like he hasn't figured out how to exist yet. It would be cute if you weren't so busy worrying about heat stroke. You adjust your head and glance up at the sky. No clouds, just endless, blazing blue. One of the other riders rides past, fanning himself with his hand. "The cookie's water barrel's hotter than a boiled boot," he mutters. "You're not hotter than the devil's bathwater." He chuckles dryly and keeps writing. But hydration is a concern. Cowboys often carry canteens filled with river water or coffee if they were desperate. Problem is, by midday, it's usually warm and tastes like burlap. Still, you take a sip from yours. It tastes metallic with a hint of regret. Now, here's the part no one tells you about the cowboy life. It's mostly waiting. You wait for cows to move. You wait for the sun to shift. You wait for your rear end to regain feeling. There's even an old saying from the trail. A cowboy learns patience, or he learns to leave, and patience becomes your silent partner as the hours stretch on. You hum a little tune under your breath, something half remembered from back east, or maybe something Cookie sang one night, half drunk on creek water and nostalgia. Eventually, the herd reaches a narrow gulch, and this is where things get interesting. See, cows do not like tight spaces. They get spooked, start hesitating, bunching up. You and the others start circling the flanks, nudging the cattle forward, trying to keep the line steady. But sure enough, one of the steers freaks out halfway through and decides he's going backwards, which is impressive in a this is the worst possible time kind of way. You shout, wave your hat, and gallop up alongside him. Your horse snorts, kicking up pebbles as you turn sharply, blocking the steer's retreat. It pauses, considers the options, and thankfully turns back around. Disaster averted? Mostly. Still, it's a reminder that out here, even a short moment of confusion can turn into a 3-hour delay and a bruised rib. Historians have noted that cowboys became experts in anticipatory movement, a fancy way of saying you learn to spot trouble before it starts. A sideways glance from a cow, a twitch of an ear, a tail flick at the wrong moment, it all means something. Cowboys had to read animals the way a gambler reads cards. Even so, things still go wrong, sometimes spectacularly. There's a running joke among historians that the Wild West wasn't actually wild, it was just badly organized. And nowhere is that more obvious than a mid-afternoon cow jam in a canyon. Eventually, the gulch clears, the herd spreads out again. You breathe a little easier. The sun started its slow dip toward the horizon. You've still got hours left to ride, but somehow, it feels a little more manageable now. You lean back in your saddle, stretch your spine, and sigh. One of the cows lets out a grunt in response, like she's just as over it as you are. You get it, girl. Truly, you do. The sun's starting to lean westward now, casting long shadows across the open plain. That golden hour glow settles over everything your horses made. The ridges in the distance, even the dust kicked up by the cows. It would be peaceful, even beautiful, if your entire body didn't feel like a single cramp wrapped in denim. Still, this part of the day is sort of magical. The worst heat has passed, the wind picks up just enough to rustle your shirt and cool your neck, and the cows, tired from a long day of wandering and being stubborn, finally start cooperating, like they all collectively remembered how walking works. Now that the pace has leveled out a bit, your mind starts to wander. It's a good time for thinking, at least. That's what every old-timer on the trail claims. They say some cowboys made their biggest life decisions during this exact stretch of time. There are stories of fellas riding for hours, staring at the sky, and deciding to propose when they got home, or to never go home again. And if your thoughts drift toward dinner, well, that's perfectly normal too. You're not proud of it, but you've started fantasizing about beans. Again, maybe even beans with a biscuit, or dare to dream. A slice of bacon. You heard a rumor. Someone snuck a tin of peaches onto the chuck wagon last week, but that might just be a myth. As you shift in your saddle, too is the pressure on your tailbone. Another cowboy rides up beside you. It's Hatchet Joe, a quiet guy with a voice like gravel and a hat that survived at least 3 lifetimes. He squints at the sun, then says, "We'll make camp for a dark, if the river holds." You nod like you totally understand what that means, even though you're not entirely sure which river he's talking about or how it could betray you. Joe tips his hat, and just like that, he's off again. This is also the part of the day where weird stuff tends to happen, like the time a cow decided to follow a prairie dog hole and ended up stuck halfway into a bush for a full hour, or when a cowboy lost a boot and found it again 3 miles later in a cowpad. Today's weirdness comes in the form of a hawk. It's circling overhead, riding the warm currents. You watch it for a while, hypnotized. Then, suddenly, it dives fast, precise, and snatches something from the brush. You don't even see what it was. It's just gone. The cowboy next to you whistles. That bird eats better than we do. He's not wrong. Speaking of food, Cookie's probably already ahead at the campsite, scowling at a pile of firewood and wondering how many ways he can threaten people into chopping it. Most chuck wagon cooks had the patience of a thunderstorm and the vocabulary of a pirate, but they were also the heartbeat of the trail. No cook, no crew. Historical records showed that Cookie had more authority than most cowhands of and over the trail boss in some situations. If you ticked off the cook, you might find yourself washing pans for a week or being served the mystery meat stew. No one wants that. As you near the edge of the next ridge, the terrain starts to change. Greener, softer. A few cottonwoods appear near a dry creek. The cows seem to sense the promise of water at least. Rest. Their pace picks up slightly, like they too are daydreaming of lying down and not being yelled at. You look up at the sky again. The clouds are faint streaks now, tinged orange and purple. The sun's halfway behind a hill, and the whole world looks like it's melting into gold. You let out a long breath. The day's almost over. But first, you've got to make camp, and you've got a strong feeling. It's your turn to help with the firewood. There's no trumpet, no grand announcement, but you feel it in your bones. The day is ending, and with it comes the cowboy's version of checking into a hotel, which, spoiler alert, involves dirt, bugs, and maybe a raucous your pillow. Welcome to camp. The herd finally comes to a sluggish halt in a low, grassy basin near a bend in the creek. Your horse sighs like he's been holding in the breath for hours, and frankly, same. The cows immediately begin flopping down or half-heartedly chewing grass with the emotional energy of overworked interns. You slide off your saddle with a groan, your knees protesting like old porch boards. The boss gives a few short whistles, pointing out where each man should set up. There's no tent, no blanket spread across a scenic knoll, just ground, gloriously horizontal ground. You drop your gear and immediately begin the time-honored trail ritual, pretending you're helping while hoping someone else volunteers first. Unfortunately, Cookie's already barking orders. Woodpiles low, water buckets empty, fires lackey while cowboys or sleepy raccoons. Guess who's on firewood duty tonight? That's right, you. You and another rider trudge off toward the tree line, gathering branches and driftwood. You swat a mosquito the size of a walnut and mutter something not suitable for polite company. The other cowboy laughs. Ain't no spa, is it? Nope, not even close. When you return, Cookie's already halfway into dinner prep. The fire crackles, and a dented iron pot bubbles with what might be beans, or stew, or something with both names and no mercy. You take a seat on an overturned bucket, boots pointed at the flames. Around you, others settle into the glow. Somebody tunes a harmonica badly, another guy whittles a stick with a knife, so dull it's basically a spoon. And then comes that moment, that perfect moment. The cows are quiet, the fire pops softly, the sky is going navy blue, stars just starting to blink into view. Your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, you're tired, deep tired, all the way into your spine. To rip it, there's a strange peace that comes with it. Cookie slops something into your tin plate and hands it over with a grunt. You don't ask what it is, you eat it. It's salty and vaguely meaty, and possibly part of a mythical creature, but it's hot. And it fills the space in your stomach that used to be hope. Now here's a wild fact. According to some historical journals, trail meals could include anything from salted pork to dried apples taught first or dough pancakes fried directly on a shovel. Yeah, a shovel. And it wasn't just about feeding bellies. It was about keeping morale from evaporating into the prairie dust. More than a few historians argue that camp meals were the glue holding cowboy crews together. Because let's face it, you're not bonding over spreadsheets out here. The guys start telling stories again. There's laughter, a little teasing. One cowboy insists he once rode a blind horse across a river in the dark. Another swears he saw a jackalope. You sip the last of your tin. Mugs contain some kind of cowboy coffee, brewed to the strength of battery acid, and lean back. Your muscles ache. Your face feels when burned. There's dirt under your fingernails, and probably somewhere in your socks too. But as the fire dances, and someone starts singing an off-key version of Home on the Range. Something warm settles over you, not just from the heat, something quieter, like belonging. No, this isn't easy. It's not glamorous, and let's be honest, the bathroom situation is just somewhere that isn't here. But you made it through the day, and out here, that's everything. The fire's gone low now, just glowing coals nestled in a ring of scorched zones. Most of the crew's already turned in, sprawled out in bedrolls or curled around their saddlebags like loyal dogs. You lay on your back, head over your face, listening to the gentle rustle of grass and the occasional soft grunt from the herd nearby. It's not quiet exactly. There's the breeze tugging through cottonwoods, a cricket orchestra tuning up in the weeds, and somewhere out there, the haunting yip of a coyote trying to sound tougher than it is. You shift a little, trying to find a rock-free patch of ground under your blanket. Your head hits something hard and unyielding. Classic. You sigh, adjust your neckerchief, and glance at the stars. And while there they are, out here, away from any town lights, the sky is a full-blown light show. The Milky Way streaks across the darkness, like someone spilled sugar across black velvet. Constellations pop out at you or Orion's belt. The Big Dipper, maybe even something Cookie swears is Cowboy Jupiter, which, for the record, does not exist according to actual astronomy. Now, here's something you might not know. Cowboys were surprisingly good at reading the stars, not in a zodiac compatibility kind of way, but for pure survival out on the open plains. A good sense of direction could mean the difference between arriving at water or becoming a cautionary tale. Some trail bosses even trained their hands to navigate at night using the North Star. Thought historians still debate just how widespread that skill actually was. Some say only the top-tier cowmen bothered. Others argue even the greenhorns picked it up, eventually, if they wanted to make it home alive. Either way, you find your gaze drifting. You spot a shooting star and almost say something, but better to just have the moment than talk over it. Your horse snorts nearby, shifting in his sleep. Yeah, horses sleep standing up sometimes. Weird, right? But efficient. You envy him. Your shoulders feel like someone tied knots in them. Your lower back has filed a formal complaint, and your feet are somewhere between aching and considering mutiny. But you made it. Your first full day on the trail. No one had to carry you. You didn't fall off your horse too badly. You didn't start a grass fire. By Old West standards, that's a win. Still, there's one last job before real sleep can happen. Night watch. You groan internally as you sit up. Every cowboy has to take a shift, and yours is the graveyard slot somewhere between really late and why is this a time that exists. You grab your hat, shake the dust off your boots, and shuffle over to the guy currently on shift. He nods, silent, hands over the lantern. You're up. Your job, keep an eye on the herd. Make sure nothing spooks the cows. If they stampede at night, it's chaos like a 1,000-pound domino effect with horns and poor lighting. Historically, cowboys would sing to the cows during night watch. No joke, not just for entertainment, but because cows are comforted by sound. A gentle tune could prevent them from bolting at every owl hoot or distant thunderclap. So here you are, under a dome of stars, softly singing some half-remembered lullaby. Your voice is rusty, off-key, but the cows seem to like it. One even flicks her ear approvingly, and in that moment, with your boots planted in cool dirt, the herd sleeping around you, and the galaxy watching from above, you feel something there. Stillness. Real, bone-deep stillness. Not boredom, not fatigue, just peace. You tip your head back and smile to yourself. Yeah, maybe you wouldn't have survived the Wild West long-term, but for tonight, you're a cowboy. Dawn doesn't ask politely. It just shows upright, brisk, and loud. You're barely asleep, curled like a shrimp in your dusty blanket, when a rooster somewhere, or maybe just Cookie, yelling like a rooster, tears through your dream about sleeping in a real bed. Rise and shine, buttercups. I ain't feeding corpses. And just like that, the day begins. You peel open your eyes. The sky's gone from star-splashed to soft pink, like someone brushed watercolor across the horizon. Dew glistens on the grass, and the air is crisp, almost chilly. For a brief second, It feels fresh and hopeful. Then you sit up and realize your hip fell asleep on a rock. Again, first order of business. Coffee. Real cowboys didn't need much, but they needed that. What you're handed is more like hot regret than a beverage is so strong it could probably clean a horseshoe, but you sip it like it's liquid gold. Around the fire, the crew's shaking off sleep. Some stretch with dramatic groans. Others mumble greetings that sound more like distant animal noises. You nod at a guy across the flames. He nods back. No words needed. You're in the same trench. Then the real work starts. Morning chores. Now, you might assume the cows just magically stayed put overnight. Nope, that would be too easy. Some wandered off, probably to chase a leaf. A few need rounding up, and you've been volunteered to help fetch the stragglers. So you settle up, trying not to whimper as your legs scream in protest, and head out with a few others. Here's the kicker. Morning rides are kinda lovely. The world feels quieter. You spot a jackrabbit darting through brush. A hawk soars overhead. For a second, the trail feels more like a painting than real life. But nature's beauty doesn't mean the job is easy. One cow's halfway into a ravine, chewing happily like she's at a brunch buffet. Another somehow got tangled in a fence a post you're sure wasn't there yesterday. Getting them back takes finesse, patience, and the kind of persuasive shouting that would get you kicked out of a library. Meanwhile, back at camp, cookies serving up. Breakfast oatmeal, maybe, or rebranded leftovers. You return just in time to scoop some onto a tin plate and sit cross-legged in the dirt, watching steam rise in the morning sun. Historically, this was peak cowboy routine. Get up before the sun, corral the cattle, eat quick, and get moving. Journals from the era often mention how little time they spent just hanging around. Every hour had a task. Every mile was a deadline. But what's really wild is how many cowboys were what Hollywood sold us. Sure, there were rugged white men with big heads and bigger mustaches, but a large percentage of real-life cowboys were black, Mexican, or indigenous. Some historians estimate up to 1 in 4 were African American. Many had been former slaves, soldiers, or ranch hands, carving out a living on the fringes of the expanding frontier. It's a part of cowboy history that often gets glossed over in the old westerns, but it was real and essential. You scrape the last of your breakfast from the tin and rinse it in the creek. Your hands are stained with dirt. Your face is sun-kissed in the "I forgot" to wear anything remotely protective way. And as the crew starts breaking camp, you glance up again at that big sky. Same sky they saw all those years ago. Same work, same grit, different century. But in this quiet moment, with your horse waiting and the trail calling, it doesn't feel like pretend anymore. It feels like a life. Dawn doesn't ask politely. It just shows upright, brisk, and loud. You're barely asleep, curled like a shrimp in your dusty blanket, when a rooster somewhere, or maybe just Cookie yelling, like a rooster, tears through your dream about sleeping in a real bed. Rise and shine, buttercups. I ain't feeding corpses. And just like that, the day begins. You peel open your eyes. The sky's gone from star splash to soft pink, like someone brushed watercolor across the horizon. Dew glistens on the grass, and the air is crisp, almost chilly. For a brief second, it feels fresh and hopeful. Then you sit up and realize your hip fell asleep on a rock. Again, first order of business. Coffee. Real cowboys didn't need much, but they needed that. What you're handed is more like hot regret than a beverage is so strong it could probably clean a horseshoe, but you sip it like it's liquid gold. Around the fire, the crew's shaking off sleep. Some stretch with dramatic groans. Others mumble greetings that sound more like distant animal noises. You nod at a guy across the flames. He nods back. No words needed. You're in the same trench. Then the real work starts. Morning chores. Now, you might assume the cows just magically stayed put overnight. Nope, that would be too easy. Some wandered off, probably to chase a leaf. A few need rounding up, and you've been volunteered to help fetch the stragglers. So you settle up, trying not to whimper as your legs scream in protest, and head out with a few others. Here's the kicker. Morning rides are kinda lovely. The world feels quieter. You spot a jackrabbit darting through brush. A hawk soars overhead. For a second, the trail feels more like a painting than real life. But nature's beauty doesn't mean the job is easy. One cow's halfway into a ravine, chewing happily like she's at a brunch buffet. Another somehow got tangled in a fence a post you're sure wasn't there yesterday. Getting them back takes finesse, patience, and the kind of persuasive shouting that would get you kicked out of a library. Meanwhile, back at camp, Cookie is serving up breakfast oatmeal, maybe, or rebranded leftovers. You return just in time to scoop some onto a tin plate and sit cross-legged in the dirt, watching steam rise in the morning sun. Historically, this was peak cowboy routine. Get up before the sun, corral the cattle, eat quick, and get moving. Journals from the era often mention how little time they spent just hanging around. Every hour had a task. Every mile was a deadline. But what's really wild is how many cowboys were what Hollywood sold us. Sure, there were rugged white men with big heads and bigger mustaches, but a large percentage of real-life cowboys were black, Mexican, or indigenous. Some historians estimate up to 1 in 4 were African American. Many had been former slaves, soldiers, or ranch hands, carving out a living on the fringes of the expanding frontier. It's a part of cowboy history that often gets glossed over in the old westerns, but it was real and essential. You scrape the last of your breakfast from the tin and rinse it in the creek. Your hands are stained with dirt. Your face is sun-kissed in the "I forgot to wear anything" remotely protective way. And as the crew starts breaking camp, you glance up again at that big sky. Same sky they saw all those years ago. Same work, same grit, different century. But in this quiet moment, with your horse waiting and the trail calling, it doesn't feel like pretend anymore. It feels like a life. You're lying flat on your back in the shade of a scraggly cottonwood, boots kicked off, head over your eyes, the herd's chewing cud. The crew scattered in various poses of collapse, and for once, no one is yelling about anything being on fire, broken, or missing. It's what passes for free time out here on the trail. And buddy, it is precious. Now, don't get too comfortable. Free time is mostly just that sliver between chores where you aren't actively wrestling a cow or boiling your brain under the sun. But it's also the part of cowboy life people forget about. The waiting, the downtime, the weird, wonderful boredom. Some guys pull out harmonicas and play sad little tunes that somehow make everything feel even dustier. Others write in journals, if they can write at all. You see one of the older cowboys carving something into a stick with a pocket knife. It might be a snake. It might be nothing. He's focused like it's art, though. You dig through your saddlebag and find a piece of jerky that's only slightly rock hard and chew it like your jaw's a steel trap. It's not great, but it's calories. And surprisingly, cowboys used to survive on very little variety. Pecan, beans, biscuits, and coffee were the big four. If you were lucky, you might get dried apples or canned peaches. If you were really lucky, Cookie didn't burn everything. You glance over at a small group playing cards. They're whispering insults, bluffing with terrible poker faces, and wagering things like matches, bullets, and, once, a half-worn sock. No one's betting actual money. They learned that lesson early on after one guy tried to cheat and ended up with his boots mysteriously full of manure the next morning. Now, here's a fun little fact. Gambling was extremely common among cowboys, but so were house rules. Every crew had their own. Some banned it entirely. Others only allowed low-stakes games. Historians still argue about how much of the Old West high-stakes saloon culture actually made it out onto the trails. Some say cowboys were too tired to bother. Others claim they played cards obsessively to keep from going stir-crazy. And honestly, after sitting in the sun for 6 hours steering cows away from puddles, you get it. One guy pulls out a harmonica again. He's not very good, but the notes drift across the prairie like lazy bees. Another cowboy hums along. Someone starts whittling a spoon. It's not productive, but it's human. Because when you spend every waking hour being alert, watching for stampedes, fixing gear, minding the weather, you need these little cracks in the schedule to breathe. to laugh, to feel like more than just a moving part in the cattle machine. And in these rare quiet moments, cowboys told stories, wild ones, like the time a guy claimed he fought off a cougar with nothing but a boot, or the legendary ghost steer that could vanish into thin air, probably just an albino cow someone kept losing track of. Some stories were rooted in truth. Most were tall tales dressed up in dust and bravado. You find yourself half listening to a new story, something about a runaway wagon, a blushing schoolteacher, and a suspiciously intelligent horse. You're not sure it's historically accurate, but it's oddly soothing, like a bedtime story wrapped in grit. And then someone asks you to tell one. You blink. May. They nod. So you sit up, dust off your pants, and give it a try. You make something up on the spot, something involving a river crossing, a snake, and a suspiciously heroic version of yourself. And they laugh, not at you, with you. For a moment, under the open sky, with the sound of cows in the distance and car games rustling in the grass, you forget how sore you are. You forget how tired, how sunburned, how utterly baffled you still are by the mechanics of saddling a horse properly. You just exist, like they did. Rough hands, dirty boots, a whole lot of sky. Cowboy time may be short, but it sticks to your ribs like cookies burned beans. Afternoons on the trail have a special kind of silence. It's not peaceful, exactly. More like the world's been turned down to a low hum. The sun hangs like a coin on fire. Heat waves shimmer off the ground, and even the cows moo in slow motion. You squint against the brightness, hat pulled low, shirt sticking to your back like a second skin. Welcome to midday survivaler, as some cowboys called it. Don't move unless you want to boil o'clock. You're back on your horse, not because you want to be, but because the herd still has miles to go. The cattle seem just as unenthused, their hooves kicking up little plumes of dust that stick to your teeth when you breathe. You remind yourself to not breathe through your mouth. Then you forget to. Seconds later, around you, the rest of the crew looks like they've collectively melded into their saddles. Nobody talks, nobody sings. Even the guy who usually hums out of 10 cowboy songs is dead quiet. It's like the heat stole the sound from there. Historically, this time of day was brutal and dangerous. Heatstroke wasn't just a modern worry. Cowboys sometimes fainted in the saddle, and worse, the cattle could collapse, too. If even a handful went down from exhaustion, it could delay the whole drive, which meant more days out here, more dust, more beans. So cowboys developed a rhythm: early starts, long midday slogs, and short breaks where you shaded your horse's eyes with your hat and hoped for a breeze. Sometimes, though, the heat brought something else with it: mirages. You stare out at the horizon and swear you see water, a silver shimmer, just beyond that line of sagebrush. But when you ride closer, it vanishes like a prank. Mirages were a common complaint in trail journals. One cowboy wrote that he spent 20 minutes trying to steer his horse toward a pond that turned out to be just sunlight showing off. Another claimed he once yelled at a hill because he was convinced it was a riverbank. The heat messes with your mind. It makes the landscape warp, stretch, play tricks. It makes your horse's tail swishing sound like whispers. It makes you wonder if you've always been here, in this dust-colored loop of cows and sweat. You reach for your canteen and take a swig of lukewarm water. It tastes like old tin, maybe with a hint of whatever weird plant it was stored near. Doesn't matter. You drink swamp juice right now and say thank you. Suddenly, your horse snorts, head jerks, ears flick towards something up ahead. You follow its gaze. There, on the far, ridge movement. It's not cows, not horses, not your crew. It's people. You raise a hand to shield your eyes, trying to make out shapes. Could be a scouting party from another drive. Could be travelers. Could be, well, less friendly folks. See, the open plains weren't empty. Native American tribes still moved across these lands, often watching cowboy herds from a distance. Some were curious, some were defensive, some traded, some didn't. Historians still argue about the complexity of those encounters. Some records describe moments of cooperation, trading goods, sharing water sources, warning each other about weather or outlaws. Others, not so friendly. One famous incident in 1876 involved a herd accidentally crossing into Lakota territory. The Cowboys claimed they didn't know. The Lakota claimed they didn't care. The resulting standoff ended with a lot of shouting and, fortunately, no bloodshed. But not every story ended so calmly. Back on your trail, the figures disappear behind a rocky outcrop. Maybe they were just passing through. Maybe they're still watching. Either way, you're reminded the West wasn't empty. It was full of lives already in motion. Cultures rooted deeper than cowboy boots. Languages older than the trails. And here you are, passing through it like a speck. The afternoon continues. The sun bakes the world. You ride in silence, aware now of every rustle in the brush, every distant flicker of movement. The herd plods on. You adjust your reins, glance at the horizon again. Still just dust and heat, and the long ride. By the time the sun starts tipping westward, the light shifts, turns gold and thick like syrup drizzled across the plains. Everything looks softer, even the cows. You're still sweating, still sore, still covered in trail grime. But somehow the evening light makes it feel almost poetic. Almost. This is camp setup hour, and for a brief window, everyone moves with a kind of unspoken rhythm, like bees knowing how to build a hive. You swing off your horse with a groan. Your knees crack, your legs threaten mutiny, but you manage to unsaddle the beast, give it a slap of thanks, and lead it to water. Then comes the real fun, picketing the horses, checking the perimeter, grabbing firewood, which, in this treeless patch of land, mostly means dried up cow chips. You'll get used to the smell, probably, and starting the fire. The chuck wagon rolls in like a dusty miracle. It's a battered wooden box on wheels, but to a cowboy, it might as well be a five-star hotel on the prairie. Now, meet Cookie, true MVP of the trail. He's got a beard that probably has its own social circle, a limp he won't explain, and a temper that runs hotter than his coffee. But somehow, he makes food happen out here, day after dusty day. Tonight's menu: beans, maybe bacon if you're lucky, maybe biscuits if someone remembered to set the dough, and coffee so strong it could punch through a brick wall. You grab your tin plate and take your place in the chow line. Cowboys don't sit at tables, they squat on rocks, logs, or just the ground. Everyone eats fast, no one talks much, not because you're antisocial, but because your jaw's too busy working through food that's about 60% texture and 40% regret. Still, it's warm, it's salty, it fills your stomach, and after a day like today, that's enough. Around the fire, the crew finally loosens up. Stories return. So do jokes about ones. Mostly, one guy does a terrible impression of the trail boss. Another tries to recite a poem and forgets halfway through. Someone else falls asleep sitting up, still holding his spoon. Historically, these moments were the glue. Cowboys came from all walks of life: former soldiers, freedmen, immigrants, teenagers escaping home, and yes, a surprising number of Mexican vaqueros, whose skills define what we now think of as cowboying. In fact, a lot of cowboy terms like rodeo, lasso, chaps, and even ranch come from Spanish. The vaquero tradition is older, more refined, and way underappreciated in pop culture. Historians are still pushing for more recognition of just how foundational those Mexican and Tejano cowboys were. Without them, the Wild West would have been a whole lot wilder and a lot more lost. You sip your coffee, grimace, and stare at the stars starting to poke through the dusk. They look impossibly close, like someone sprinkled diamonds over black velvet. One of the older cowboys points out Isolation Saurian's belt, the Big Dipper, maybe a shooting star if you're lucky. You try to remember which one helps you find north, but the sky is too vast, you're too tired. A harmonica makes a sad little appearance again, the same off-key tune, the same stubborn attempt to sound like something between hope and homesickness. It's weird. You think you've spent all day wrangling smelly cows, dodging mirages, burning under a sun that clearly hates you, and somehow, right now, sitting in the dirt eating beans, you feel kinda okay. That's cowboy magic. You scrape your plate clean, wipe it with a bit of bread, and rinse it with coffee. Yes, really, that's the sub tonight. Then you tie your bedroll tight. Check your boots for scorpions because, of course, and pick a spot near the fire. Not too close, not too far, just warm enough. Your bones creak as you lay down. The night air cools fast. Someone snores already. Someone else mutters in their sleep. You pull your blanket up to your chin and stare at the stars one more time. Somehow, they look even brighter now. Night on the trail feels like stepping into a different world. The stars are a glittering roof. The fire flickers low, and the sounds around you shift into a slower, quieter rhythm. You lie back on your bedroll, the rough canvas beneath you grounding you like the earth itself. This is the time for reflection and brief moments between the long, hard days when your mind finally has space to wonder. You think about everything that happened today, the early morning chill turning to relentless sun, the stubborn cows, the endless miles, the funny, strange, sometimes frustrating men you call your crew, and maybe, just maybe, you wonder what this all means. Sleep doesn't come easy. Your body aches, your throat is dry, and the firelight makes shadows dance like ghosts on your eyelids. But slowly, the sounds of the night start to lull you. You hear the low murmur of voices, shelf whispers, half snores, the occasional clink of a tin cup, the distant cry of a coyote. Sharp and lonely, somewhere, a horse shifts in its picket line. You might catch yourself smiling at how absurd it all is. Here you are, miles from anywhere, covered in dust, eating beans, and trying not to think about how sore you'll be tomorrow. You recall a quirky fact. Cowboys didn't just sleep anywhere. They learned to pick safe spots away from rattlesnake nests, flood zones, and those pesky fire ants. They'd arrange their gear just so, sometimes using their saddles as pillows. Comfort was a luxury, but a well-chosen campsite could make a difference. And historians still debate how often cowboys truly got a good night's sleep versus napping on the move. Some say they caught cat naps in the saddle. Others argue that exhaustion made them sleep like rocks once camped. Either way, tonight, you feel the pull of rest. Your mind drifts toward the softer parts of the dive crackle of the fire, the shared laughter, the stories told under the endless sky. Maybe you even dream of wide open spaces where the horizon stretches forever, and the only sound is the gentle rustle of grass. Tomorrow will bring its own battles, dust, heat, and a whole lot of cattle. But for now, the night wraps around you like a warm blanket, a gentle reminder. Even the toughest cowboys needed moments like this, moments to breathe, to dream, to just be. You close your eyes, the faint scent of sagebrush in the air, the cool breeze whispering secrets, and slowly the world fades. Dawn creeps in quietly, soft light spilling over the horizon like spilled milk. The camp stirs, stretching, yawning, shifting from night's quiet to day's chaos. You wake with a creak, muscles complaining but your spirit ready or at least willing for another round. This last stretch of your cowboy day is about breaking camp and setting off again the routine dance of packing, saddling, and pushing forward. You grab your gear, folding your bedroll with as much care as your stiff limbs allow. Every movement is slow, deliberate. Horses whinny softly, eager to be free of their pickets. The chuck-wagon driver bellows out a morning greeting, the first crack of humor in a long day. You saddle up, feeling the familiar weight and smell of leather. The herd, sensing the day's rhythm, begins to stir as well. Cows low, calves bleat, and you prepare for the next leg of this endless journey. There's something deeply satisfying about the ritual way. The sun climbs higher with every step, the feel of reins in your hands, the company of your crew, despite the hardships, despite the dirt and sweat. This is life. It's raw, tough, sometimes thankless, but it's yours. You recall a lesser-known detail. Not all cowboys were men. Women rode these trails too, often disguised or under nicknames. Their stories have been overshadowed, but they played crucial roles. Ranch hunters, sharpshooters, even legendary rodeo champions. Historians still debate how many women lived this life openly versus in secret, but their legacy lingers. As you move out, you glance back at the fading campfire smoke, the circle of your temporary home dissolving into the morning haze. The trail stretches, a endless, dusty, unpredictable. You settle into the rhythm once more, a cowboy bound to the land and the herd, riding toward whatever the day will bring. Now, as your eyes grow heavy and the day's dust settles in your mind, let yourself drift away gently. Imagine the soft rustle of the prairie grass swaying in a warm breeze, the distant call of an owl welcoming the night, the slow crackle of a dying fire whispering its last stories. You're not just a cowboy anymore, you're part of the land itself, carried by the stars and cradled by the endless sky. So, breathe deep, let the quiet wrap around you like a soft blanket, feel the gentle rocking of your bedroll beneath you, and know that no matter where you are, you're safe here in this moment, in this story. Sleep well, friend. The trail will wait for you tomorrow.